man.
Party people in the place to be. It's about that time for us to.
Yeah.
What's up, chiropractors? This is Dr. Silveri, your guide up the mountain to $1 million practice. If you're looking for the roadmap to grow your practice fast, then keep on listening. This is the Path to $1 Million podcast, where I chat with today's most successful practicing chiropractors. And remember, if you want to get there faster, visit getmemorenewpatients.com to find out more about Leverage Media, the most comprehensive digital marketing agency for chiropractors on the planet.
What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Nick with Leverage Media. Welcome to another episode of Path to $1 Million podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Dr Capra with Genesis Software. Brian and I have become fast friends, and we are in an accountability group together. We spend a lot of time together, it seems like.
We do, lately. So. It's like I see you every weekend somehow.
He's like my drinking buddy at the events. We have a great time.
Every Monday we talk.
So, Brian, give us the for people that don't know who you are, don't know what Genesis is. Give us kind of like the 30-second to 1 minute rundown of kind of your history and how you ended up where you are now.
Okay, so I started practice in 2002, and shortly thereafter, met two gentlemen that were building. One was a PhD in artificial intelligence, Bell Labs guy. His son was a computer science graduate from Princeton. My practice was in Princeton. Mm-hmm. And they were building technology actually for medical billing. And I implemented that as their beta tester, and my collections went up by 40%.
Wow.
So
how big was the practice at that time?
My practice was, I was seeing about 300 a week. I was collecting 30 or so. You know.
So like going up 40% was a lot.
Yes, it was a lot of money, very noticeable. There's a clear-cut difference, right? Yeah. So what I learned from that experience was that what was new, they were using cloud-based artificial intelligence with automated workflow, a whole bunch of stuff that
almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, so 15 years ago, right?
So that was like super cutting edge,
right?
Yeah,
it was. As a matter of fact, clients at that time, the new. So what happened was, I said, what we're doing here with billing applies to the entire practice. It's not. You start to see things as a chiropractor through chiropractic colored glasses, right? Lenses. Yeah. So you're like, man, that's amazing. Collections. It's not why we do what we do. We want to make good money and all that, but. There's what about the patients? What about their experience? What about the retention? What about how many things we could do with this? Yeah. So we formed Genesis as partners. Yeah. And that was the
what
Genesis.
Year was that?
Was that?
What was it? What year was that?
2004, I think. 2005.
So you graduated in 2002.
Yeah.
And you started Genesis years later. 2004.
Yeah.
You were seeing 300 in under 2 years. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
That's great.
Great practice. It was in a gym. I loved my practice. My idea, actually, the reason I met those guys was my thought was to go and replicate that model of opening practices in gyms. Got it. I was looking to raise money. My bookkeeper introduced me to them because she was their bookkeeper. Yeah. And I was looking to raise money. I didn't realize that it was kind of a setup. They were trying to sell their software or their service to somebody that would take a hack at it. There's a little bit more to that story, why they even started building it. It's all very serendipitous. But so that's how it all began. And it all happened very quickly. And when it's the last thing in the world I was thinking about doing when I was in chiropractic school or when I was in practice. Yeah. Never in a million years did I think I would be in software. Yeah. And I don't even feel like I'm in a software business. I'm in really a business that really changes the way technology is used to manage the business of chiropractic.
And so so that was, you said 05 is when you guys started, or 04, and then how long before you stopped practicing to focus full time on Genesis?
I shut my personal practice down. I started referring my patients off as we started.
Like right away when you started Genesis.
Within 1 year, I was out of I haven't owned my own practice since then. Since then, so 05, 06. Yeah. Since that time, I've worked in friends' offices as a chiropractor, and that never worked because I could never really do both things well. So I thought, all right, I don't own my own practice, but at least I could still see patients because I missed that part of it. But it really, something would always, whether it was the patients, usually it was Genesis. So I decided at some point to just stop.
That's just a little bit of a side tangent. I think is interesting for a lot of chiropractors, especially ones that get to like a real successful level. They start to think about other things other than just their practice. What was it that triggered? I mean, because obviously you love chiropractic, you love being in practice. You were gonna do like this big model. What was it that so quickly you were like, I got to do this? And then like, what made you? What I guess what gave you the courage to make that jump and make that decision?
I think part of it is just how I'm built. If you do strength finders, my number one is strategic.
Yeah.
And that just means I see very clearly 1,000 steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Not to like toot my own horn or anything, but that's just how I am. And so I could see that what was happening and how big an opportunity was. And then you're in practice and you love what you do.
Yeah.
And the purpose, obviously, to go to chiropractic school, go through chiropractic, get out, graduate, and build a practice. You have to have a pretty big purpose to do that, right? So it's about the patients and the principle of chiropractic. But what I realized, part of it was the business was doing well, and I knew we could do a lot more with focus.
Yeah.
And part of it was, it's just like, I could, not only with the business did it deserve it and need it, but I felt like ultimately, although it's indirect, I could help more patients by focusing on the technology and the company.
I think that's how, like, I kind of see leverage as well, where helping more chiropractors get the message of chiropractic out and making them more successful allows me to have a lot bigger impact than a single brick and mortar office, in Illinois. So.
Because, I mean, if you look at the numbers, how many people are there just in the United States? 320 million some odd people. We have 60,000 chiropractors. If every person got seen once a week by just something like every one of us would have to see 5,000 patients a week. Yeah. If that math, do the math yourself to check my numbers.
It seems about right.
Yeah, I hacked at that, but it's like a crazy. It's a crazy amount of people that we all have to see.
It's a good thing that your partners do the math side of it.
Yeah, exactly. I got a bookkeeper, thank God.
All right. So what I wanted to talk to you about is, how is it, Genesis is always evolving, always. Yes. I've learned a lot about it since we've become friends. And you're always kind of like on that cutting edge and trying to make it better and try to improve it. What are the ways that chiropractors can really use technology to make more in their practice? Because we, like what you said, you're like, we're not doing it just to make more in collections, but if you're doing the work, you should want to collect as close to 100% as possible.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So what are some ways that they can utilize technology, and what do you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, so one thing you just said triggered something in my brain, to do the work. So I'll come back to that. But there's several things when it comes to Genesis that I think make a huge impact and or really set it apart. And I'm not just trying to talk about Genesis, but first of all, what's a game changer in technology these days? There's several things, I think. One is the cloud, obviously. When we started Genesis, it was the cloud. When I would talk to a new client, I think I said this earlier, it was like, oh, I don't know about the cloud. My internet speed's not fast. I'm worried about my data. It's not secure. The other software companies say, you don't own your data. They were being told lies, but also there was just a fear around the cloud, where the game changer today is doctors like, if it's not in the cloud, I don't want it. Right. Like they already are seeing it's just the new norm now.
Well,
everything's in the cloud, and every big company, from Microsoft to HP, all they do is talk about the cloud. The cloud is not, but was the first, I think, game changer. That step where people now accept that the cloud is important. Mm-hmm. Why it's important, I think, is really the next phase of these things. What can be done once all the data is in the cloud? So you have things like, you hear buzzwords like big data analysis. Yep. You hear things like artificial intelligence, computer learning. You hear things, even blockchain, which you hear about cryptocurrency, but the foundation of cryptocurrency is the type of technology, which is blockchain. Right. And blockchain doesn't only have to apply to currencies. It can apply to something very valuable that, because of the technology, becomes very, very secure and easy to exchange. So that could be an entire patient file, for example, where you own your own data. That, I think, is going to be...
patient does.
The patient owns your own data, and your data can be taken wherever you go.
Got it.
And there's a lot of talk of even being able to monetize your own data.
Right.
So there's stuff like that. But how does technology today, the way it is, change for just a doctor, right? We all know how to make more money in practice.
Yeah.
You get more patients, You collect more money per visit, or you get more visits per patient.
Right.
There's only 3 ways to do it. Right. If you look at just the billing side, if you do insurance at all, cash it applies too. But if you talk about insurance, it's way more complex. Yeah. That's why we attack that first, because my perspective was I want to help doctors see more patients. Mm-hmm. How can they see more patients when this monster, very complex thing exists out there? This collecting insurance dollars and making sure you're keeping insurance companies accountable to paying you every single penny. I also know that from the insurance industry, there's a lot of people don't realize the real game that's being played. Yeah. You got insurance companies where they make over 50% of their profit on what's called the float. Yeah. I don't know if I've told you this before, but
yeah, and I think this is super interesting because I didn't really understand how this works and how it kind of like works against us as a profession. So I want you to kind of explain this.
I mean, we all tend to think they really hate chiropractors. They don't hate anybody.
Right.
It's just
they just love money.
Right. They just love money. It's not only that, but it's their fiduciary responsibility to make more money, profit every single quarter, year, whatever. Yeah. So the decisions that are made in the insurance industry are very interesting. Going back to my partners, one of my partners, the AI PhD, was actually a CIO for the largest financial firm in the world. And one thing he taught me was, we're doing this billing thing because we built technology for Wall Street, for the stock market.
Right.
And he goes, there's way more complex things that happen on Wall Street every single day, transactions. And by law, I think it's called T+1 or something like that, but by law, everybody involved in those transactions has to be paid, and the books have to be reconciled by the end of day.
Yeah.
And he goes, so why do you think it is that you see a patient and you don't just get paid by the end of the day? And that was my first game-changing moment. So there's a whole lot to this. I wrote a whole white paper book on this about what they don't really want you to know. What actually is going on is, even if they have 30 days, even if they have 1 day or 2 days, the money that sits in their account for that amount of time, between the time you've adjusted your patient and you actually get the check in the mail, collects interest. Mm-hmm. So obviously on billions and trillions of dollars, the interest is explosive. Right. And 50% of their profit is the interest.
So the longer that they can keep it in there, the more interest they get.
Right. So once you realize that this transaction is not very complicated, and you see how complicated they continue to make it, why make it more complex all the time? Mm-hmm. Why ICD-10 with 9 million codes as opposed to, do they really care? Is it really for the patient's benefit? I find it hard to believe, right? Because you just look at the process, that the fact that they have more than a day to pay you is already a game changer for them. So how does that even happen? How are they allowed to do that? So they rigged the system, right? So this is actually rigging the system. You hear a lot about politics and rigging systems, and this is actually on the books, done. They're one of the only industries, insurance industry, that is exempt from antitrust law. Mm-hmm. So they've kind of made it look sort of like it's not antitrust, like a monopoly. Antitrust is when you have a monopoly. You're the only provider of a good or a service in a market. Yeah. Can't do that in a capitalist economy, right? It's the one thing you can't do that the government would actually go. You remember Microsoft was going through this. I think Google's going through this now, right? So they actually figured out a way to do the opposite of a monopoly, which is to be the only purchaser of a good or a service. Mm-hmm. So once that happens, single payer system, for example, in essence, it's sort of a single payer system for the purposes of what we're talking about right now, because there's only 4 or 5 payers that cover over 80% of the people in the country. Right. So once you're the only payer for chiropractic care, you get to dictate what you'll pay for it, right? Yeah, right. And that drives down the price, not fairly. I think it's a Ferguson Act. I think it's called the Ferguson Act, where they actually were by law now allowed to be exempt from antitrust. Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's one of, if not the only industry in the country allowed to be exempt from that.
So just so we can kind of get to the end part that I thought was interesting was, so they float, they have the float where they keep the money in the account, and they take that money and do what with it?
They do a lot of things with it. They invest in technology. They invest in making the system more complex. The HCFA form, everything has just gotten more complex. The IC9s, the modifiers, the linking, the positioning, everything matters. So important, right? Why? It's not, except it makes it more complicated for you as a provider to get them the claim. And then, of course, there's denials, where every insurance company has different denial codes and different, so it becomes very, very complex for you to get a claim to them and then follow up and get paid by them and then follow up on those claims. And then now you got the next level, which is the audit. So now they take that money and they reinvest it. Even if you did get paid, we're going to take the money back, right? So it's a crazy system. So there's a guy that I used to talk to pretty regularly. He's pretty high up in Aetna. And I said, what's their return on investment for this? He says $14. 14 to 1.
Wow.
For every audit.
Wow.
So what do they invest in is another thing. How do they find you? And this is an example where they're using artificial intelligence and big data analysis on their side to leverage against us, right? So they have this massive database that's just learning and finding characteristics or traits of providers where they could win an audit. Right? And this thing plucks them out and spits them out like on a conveyor belt, right? We went to Napa, right? The thing that spits the bad grapes out. Same thing. I love that when they showed us that in Napa. This thing that's like the grapes go by the line, right? And the laser hits the grape, and if it's a bad grape, it spits it out with an air pressure. So this thing is looking at doctors and spitting out the doctor that there's a good chance we're going to win that audit. So they're getting better and better about, in an automated with technology way, finding the bad grapes. Because they know their 14 to 1 goes to 15 to 1 to 16 to 1 to 17 to 1 and so on. So that's what they're investing in. They're also investing in cheap labor and more automation on that side. So
what is on the doctor side of it? How are they able to use technology to start to fight against that?
So what you start to realize is that this thing is a massively rigged. It's not about chiropractors. They don't just hate us. They're doing this to everybody. And so if you're going to beat them at their own game, you got to do the same thing. So what we've been doing as chiropractors is buying our software license and putting our server in our office and doing, seeing patients, doing our notes, submitting claims. And anything that could be learned from your data is lost in your office.
It's because it's only
in your office, right? And so that's the problem number one. We're not leveraging, no pun intended, leveraging the data that we're producing every single day. And that comes from, when I mean by leveraging data, that could be anything now. That could be claims data. It could be documentation data. It could be any type of data that's happening in your office and not shared, while there's another entity out there actually doing that with massive unlimited money and technology. They're just going to crush you, right? They're going to crush this whole thing at some point. And then they tell you can go cash, and even that's a problem these days. But
a lot of people don't know that they can get audited as cash providers.
It's happening more and more. So what's happening actually is when you're submitting, giving your patients a super bill with your name on it, with your diagnosis and procedure or whatever, even as a cash patient or just a simple super bill, when the patient gets denied for the claim now, right? Now they're going to go and say, well, why? Of course, the insurance company is going to play you against the patient. They're going to say, well, your doctor didn't do this or didn't do that, or this is incorrect, or we need documentation from the doctor. As soon as that happens and you don't have documentation because you think you're cash, doesn't matter. What the state boards are now requiring is Medicare level documentation requirements, which is pretty much the gold standard in documentation, right? So what happens now, the patient finds out that they can't get what they need from you to get their claims paid. They tell the insurance company, they tell the state board, and now doctors are getting audited by the state board. And I would argue that's even worse than getting an insurance audit, because you could just pay for the insurance audit, but you could lose your license with a state board. So that is actually happening. But back to the technology, we have to start to think about this, and this is where we were 15 years ago. If we want to at least have a fighting chance and level the playing field against insurance companies, and I'll say this also applies to patient retention and all this other things, but first level is level the playing field against insurance companies. How are we going to do that? Build something in the cloud where everybody's claims goes through that system. And things like artificial intelligence are telling doctors if you're putting a code in or a diagnosis code, oh, you need a modifier on this one, or you need a link a diagnosis.
So you don't have the way that you're saying that doctors could be using AI and machine learning to their advantage is you don't have to be the expert on ICD-10 or the new thing or the modifier or the pointing or the positioning. Like the system will either do it for you or tell you, hey, you got to make sure this is going to get rejected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's blowing that bad grape out.
Yeah. What do we do in chiropractic is there's lots of great compliance experts, and they're really important for us to have them. But trying to learn it, or you or your biller or somebody try to learn the rules, and they're changing all the time, because insurance companies, of course, are going to change the rules all the time. Yep. Why wouldn't they? Because how are you going to find the rule change in your little office with limited data?
Yep.
It's actually a good example in Illinois. This happened several years ago. Blue Cross Blue Shield in Illinois suddenly wanted a subluxation code in position 1 on the claim form. Mm-hmm. Did they tell anybody about that? Maybe it was like on their website somewhere, right? Sure. So what happens? Now you're practicing in Illinois with your little client server software, which means not cloud-based, right? Yep. You go in, you submit your claim, and now by the time you maybe find this out, what's going to actually happen? You're going to see that patients dozens of times potentially before you start getting denials with no idea why. Right. Then you got to call. Maybe you figure it out. Maybe you start changing your ways in your offices, and maybe you have multiple doctors. They all got to remember to do it right, and they're still going to make mistakes. Sure. Right. So as opposed to, let's just pretend we have everybody in Illinois is on a cloud-based technology submitting claims. As soon as we get that denial in the cloud, and we realize it's happening on all Blue Cross and find out why that is, we immediately build a countermeasure in that as soon as anybody in Illinois is submitting a claim with not a subluxation in position 1, it alerts them up front and doesn't let the claim out the door even, and lets them know why this has happened, and from now on do this. And if you don't, it's going to tell you every single time. So it forces the learning. It's called the network effect. We were talking about vaccines today and all this. This is like what I call shared immunity. It's like what would happen potentially is we find a problem with claim processing in your office, right? We build the countermeasure because of the claims that came out of your office. Yeah. Everybody gets immunity to that. Yeah. It's called the network effect. Yeah. It's like shared immunity. That's the type of thing that if we're going to have any fighting chance to do this on a consistent basis and scale this on a large scale for our profession or other professions, we have to start leveraging artificial intelligence. That's an example of an artificial intelligence rule, an automation rule, a big data analysis, right? We've analyzed a lot of data. The collective amount of data helps us see a spike in denials much quicker than you would see in your own office. Yeah,
you might. I mean, for example, in Illinois, we had like budget problems always, but because the state wasn't paying the insurance premiums for this certain policy, we were getting paid 2 years after we had billed it, and like they would send these like little insurance checks that didn't mean anything for every like quarter or so. But by the time that you got the actual, because they didn't send you an EOB saying, hey, we're gonna pay you this, they sent the EOB when the check came, and by then the denial had already, like, the time had passed, and it was just like, it was such a racket, and so to be able to have, with hospitals, they've got whole, legal teams, and they've got big money behind it. The only way that you have a chance to have that level of help is if, you're all in it together, like you're talking about with the client.
Yeah, so when somebody becomes a Genesis client, for example, or even a system like ours, you're not just buying a software, you're becoming part of a network. A network of people leveraging data to beat insurance companies at their own game. Yeah. Same thing goes for documentation. And this is where it really starts to make an impact on our profession. I mean, yes, documentation with automation and rules, but so now the documentation tells you what codes you've supported by your documentation, right? Yeah. Very cool, right? I don't have to remember every single code, or I don't have to worry that if I submit a claim, it's not supported by my documentation, right? And vice versa. Now that's a good thing. But what about all that data in there? there are outcomes. The patients are improving. They're getting certain types of care, chiropractic care. They're getting certain types of rehab in those offices. Their outcome assessment tools. And those are not just the ones that are like, you know, the neck pain disability index and this. It's not all about pain, but you can have quality of life outcome assessment tools. So changing the game on that is important too. I'll tell you why. But first of all, the documentation, we're kind of turning the whole documentation thing on its head, because the documentation is really the thing. We all had dreams coming out of school about what we were going to do. Yeah. It's the nightmare. It's the monster in our dreams. It's the thing that we want to do the least, generally speaking, in chiropractic. It's the thing that keeps us from helping more people, saving more lives, doing what we want to do. If we just didn't have to document, right? So I'll go cash, which doesn't work either anymore, right? So what do we do about that? We got to turn it on its head. We got to make it be the thing that you want to do the most. And why is that? Because if we leverage technology and artificial intelligence, we can actually totally change the game on how chiropractic is perceived. First of all, it makes your life easier, right? You document, or just like by the patient opening their intake form and they say they have neck pain or they were in an auto accident, it tells them to fill in the outcome assessment tool or the auto accident injury form or whatever. So it's not dependent on you or your staff or any of this. Then the data can flow from one visit to the next, no matter what type of document you open, whether it's an initial exam or a daily note. You're not having to recreate that data every single visit or re-exam. It's smart enough to pull the last most important data point or measure for pain or range of motion or whatever to that visit that you're doing, so that you can quickly create the next note and the codes and the diagnosis codes and procedure codes. And if it's a re-exam, it tells the patient to fill out your outcome assessment tool again, and so on. So it's really what we're able to do now with artificial intelligence and automation is extremely powerful. What that means to our profession is game changing. Why? Because now we have thousands of users using a single documentation system with diagnosis and procedure codes and reimbursements. And that could be cash, doesn't have to be insurance. So we're collecting data across millions of patients, where now if we want to extrapolate that data in any which way we want to show the efficacy of chiropractic care, efficacy of different techniques, efficacy of different stretches and rehabs and all this stuff, the data is in one repository, because we all know we need more research. But we're not big pharma. We're not hospitals. We don't have money to do it. And we're not experts in it either. Even if you wanted to do research and there was somebody that could do something with data, what do you do with it? Send them print forms and send it to them? What are they going to do with that data? How much data is there? Is it good data? Right? So we're just not in a position to do the research that's needed. There's not the funding. There's not the technology. But with a network like this, that's real. We can actually do that now. The other thing that's a game changer is we know a lot about every single patient now. Now we can get very specific about their needs. We know they're a 45-year-old female with low back pain. Well, imagine if just by you documenting, it's sending that patient specific marketing and information, I say marketing, but information about specific to the type of care they're getting, the other things that supportive things that they might need or could do at home, other products that they might be able to benefit from, just by you documenting. So just by documenting, research is happening. Just by documenting, the patient's getting better educated, buying more products. We talked about more revenue. Now we'll assume for a second we're beating the insurance company at their own game. We're making sure we get every cash dollar. Now we are able to actually get sell patients products
without you and your staff having to always be talking to them about things or remembering or it's just happening without, like, the thing you're already having to do, it's triggering off all those automations. So
it starts to make documentation something you want to do more rather than less, because so much more happens when you do it right. So you just said something. What did you say? Because it triggered something for a second.
With the what was I saying about? Was it about the supplements? Anyway. It'll come there.
It'll come back to me too. I mean, so much more now could happen when you simply document.
It was that you and your staff don't have to spend the time, trying to remember, because I mean, I can have 100 meetings about, hey guys, I want to try to get more reviews this quarter, or hey guys, I want to let's get more people to the dinner talk or whatever. But when it gets busy, they're not going to be taking the time to do that, like extra 3 things. Those ups and downs. So if that happens without you having to do anything, it's amazing.
All of that. So so the fact that it's consistent every single time. I could tell you I'll tell you my own experience. You tell me if this has ever happened in your practice or you hear this a lot. Yeah. I would go to a seminar and find some great products I thought was going to be, valuable for some of my patients. Could have been a supplement or what have you. Yeah. And I would buy the whole case and get the whole thing. And I'm busy. I'm seeing 300 something a week. I'm busy. And I never get around to actually talking to patients about that. I can't educate my staff enough to teach them about that stuff. We sell a few bottles of stuff, and it's benefit. It's not like you're just trying to make money off your patients, right? You really believed in this stuff, right? Or even a simple pillow that they could sleep on that would be better for them, or a brace or neck nest. Martoni, shout out. Right? So it just doesn't happen consistently every single time and every single patient. So imagine if now all of a sudden the content that they're receiving is specific to them too. Yeah. Like it's tailored to them. Yeah. It happens every single time. Yeah. Without fail. Your staff
and the better that you're documenting, the more specific it is.
The more accurate everything becomes, and it happens perfectly, and it happens every single time.
How much have we talked about this with Genesis content? Yeah. Like of just like, if they're interested in this, let's give more content about this. Yeah. We want this, let's talk about that.
Yeah, and it could be responsive to the patient even.
Yeah, and it's like for that stuff to happen automatically, it's like, because that's the only way it's going to happen. And the thing I find with our clients is if it wasn't for our system of getting them to create content and doing all the stuff that we do around it, it wouldn't happen. Like once humans that are busy start to get involved, it all falls apart. Absolutely. So unless there's either,
what if you have staff turnover?
Right.
Your whole house of cards comes crashing down.
Right, because that one $14 employee left.
If it was working, even if it was working perfectly,
right.
That person, God forbid, something happens. People leave for good reasons. Like now what? The whole thing, and it was only if you figured it out and got it working in your office. Yeah. How many other offices have got it working perfectly every single time? And there's more to leveraging technology and automation when it comes to patient retention and education. We were talking about this morning, how important it is to really monitor that relationship early on in those first 6, 7, 8 visits, because that's when they're really making the decision, not when they sign up for care, but they're really deciding.
Like 8 is that.
Yeah, it's like that curve where that's where they're actually subconsciously deciding, am I going to stay for the 2-year care plan I just signed up for? Yeah. Or am I not? They're deciding early on. Right. Keeping in contact with them specific to who they are in that time frame is a game changer. Yeah. Consistently every single time.
When I hear you talk about Genesis, the thing that I really hear you talk a lot about is you're always looking for ways to take out the human element to where mistakes can start to happen. So like with your like at the end of the day, when you were talking about like everything reconciling, these things that you have to go and find reports in other softwares are now just like a person is in charge of it. It's sending them the task. Yeah. And then you as the CEO, as the doctor, can see, did Mary do all of her tasks today?
Yeah. That's what we call single point management. Without fail, when I first talk to a client that's is looking for software, they want to know if I have the right reports, right? Yeah. Of course, we've got reports, right? But reports are not what make anybody do anything. Yeah. That you got your process. They don't make people do anything. They want to do the right things. Yeah. Your team wants to know everything they're supposed to do every day. They want to do it. They want to feel good about it, and they want to go home and sleep well and get paid. Yep. And they're not, even if they're on your mission, they're not thinking about it like you are. That's right. So this is what we learned first, and this is kind of what I was telling you, like when we first started the conversation here, was what I saw in the billing world when we first started. My collections went up. The one thing I saw that was a game changer, beside the artificial intelligence and the in the cloud, that was all good. But what was really important is because of the artificial intelligence and the automation, my billing team wasn't going to look for insurance claims to follow up on them.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they have to go find the claims, they're going to make a mistake.
Right.
So if you make the artificial intelligence learn over time, it finds the right claims perfectly every single time that need a phone call.
Yeah.
So it would start to take the claim and route it to what we call a workbench.
Yep.
And the claim would be there, and it'd be, here's why you need to follow up on it, all these reasons. And so, and you don't go to a report, you just sit in front of this workbench all day. And as you're calling claims, new claims are coming, and you're just working your
Like
workbench.
as it's happening.
As it's happening.
Yeah.
You could just hit it. You could have just hit the button at the table, submitted a claim, and you forgot the birth date on the patient account. It's going to come right back.
Yeah.
So that, you have to call an insurance company
Instead
on
of
that.
waiting 2 years,
Right.
for the insurance company to be like,
Yeah.
you suck.
We did something interesting in Jersey with that too. If you remember, remind me later. But what happens now is there's always reports and aging reports. You can sort and filter by code, by payer. Like, it's good. Data analysis on your own is good.
Yeah.
But what really gets you paid is follow up.
Yep.
Following up on every single claim the second it's due to be followed up on.
Including secondary insurance.
Secondary
like,
audit.
I can't even imagine how much money I've lost on not
Oh my gosh.
collecting secondary insurance the way that
You got to
we
automate
should.
all that. Yeah. So, I mean, just the fact that the EOBs are automatically posted and reconciled,
Yeah.
and now you have a secondary that's an automatic system, just sends it to the secondary without secondary EOBs coming back. It's still a patient balance, or maybe there's a denial code in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Immediately right to the follow-up bench the second it's due, so that you have across Genesis now we have thousands and thousands, millions of claims, right? So I literally can log in to Genesis as the super user and see exactly how many claims before the end of today have to be followed up on by our billing follow-up team.
Wow.
Right? And if it's not zero by the end of the day, that's a problem.
Yeah, right.
Just simple. It's just basic. So simple concept.
Yeah.
If you didn't do now, did they do quality work? And that's a whole separate process.
Yeah.
But the first rule of management,
Yeah.
well, there's 3 rules, but like you have to quantify the work. Then you have to delegate the work, which is boom, it comes right to you.
Yeah.
And then you have to measure that it actually verify.
Yeah.
Did it get done or did it not get done?
Yeah.
So if it's 0, it's done. And then there's quality assurance and all that after the fact. But the same concepts apply to the patient experience.
Yeah.
You want to call the patient on the 8th visit because that's a decision point, fork in the road, crossroads for the patient, right? If you believe that, why not, when the patient checks in on visit 7, open yourself a task automatically? This is the 7th visit call. I have to do this. If that's what you believe. Or when a patient starts, I want to call them on their birthday. Send a task to remind you.
Yeah.
Next year, whenever their birth date is. Or let's say you have a new patient check in.
But you make that task one time. You make that automation one
you make
time,
that
and it does it
one time.
for everybody.
You might have you might have a series of tasks that have to happen on a new patient. They check in for that visit, or something happens that triggers it, and now you have somebody has to verify benefits, somebody has to create the financials, somebody has to create the recommendations for care, which would be the doctor. All different people, boom, tasks. Patients that check in or miss a visit, that's really important to follow up on. If you're really serious about managing patient retention, which is a key factor in making more money in that experience, if they miss a visit, huge red flag. They didn't just miss the visit. They didn't even call to reschedule it.
Right.
Somebody has to own that. So we're talking about tasks. Tasks have to go to somebody to own it. So by the end of the day, somebody's responsible if it's not done.
Right.
So you got no-shows, you got patients who leave without future appointments, you got care plans that are going to expire, you got inventory that might be low for a certain product, you got credit cards that are on recurring for patients that are on recurring that suddenly have expired or for whatever reason, maybe they were canceled, maybe the date just ran out, whatever the case may be. All these things that go into managing the patient experience have to come to you.
Yeah.
Because when you actually look at all the things that have to happen perfectly every single time for a patient over their lifespan, there's hundreds of them. I won't say thousands. There's hundreds of things that have to happen perfectly, and you need to know immediately when they don't happen. And as a CEO, you can't go to dozens of reports. You have first of all, you're a chiropractor.
Right.
You're usually practicing on some level. You don't have time to do what you have to do and go and look at 15 reports. So I always ask them, okay, we have that report. What are you going to do with that report? How often are you going to look at that? Oh, yeah, I don't really look at it that often. I look at it sometimes. And this is why you find fire after fire after fire in your office, and you fix it and you train your CA,
Yeah.
and they get better at that as soon as you get busy, and then you have these ups and downs where processes are just not strong enough to withstand a lot of new patients.
A lot of times you don't even realize the leaks are in the bucket.
Yeah.
Like because it's like, how would you know?
Yeah.
Unless like you run that report that month or that quarter or whenever it is. And, with so many things going on, especially like at the front desk, they're busy. It's not going to happen unless it is automated. We were talking this morning about the Never Lose a Customer book. And, if you haven't read that book, you should. But there's 8 stages in the first 100 days or I guess 8 stages in the process of a customer life cycle. And the first 100 days are super important. And if you wanted to create that process, being able to use tasks for the communication side of it, or let you know, like, hey, you're supposed to mail this thing out to this person today, or you're supposed to text them or call them or email them this or whatever it might be. The only way that that's going to happen is if it's automated and if it,
absolutely, there's no, like you said, the busier you get, the more a victim you become of your own success in models that are not automated.
Right.
And now I'm not talking about automating. Somebody has to call the patient. Yeah. Somebody has to do that work, but having to stop while patients are coming in and busy and all this stuff, especially your peak times, if to stop and go to a report to look at the no-shows even, which is very basic in every office. That's just one report. You got to go to check how many things I have to check to make sure that they were done correctly today. As opposed to, and it's ironic too, because we're a proactive profession. We're proactive about health. Most of us are proactive about most things in our lives because of the philosophy of chiropractic, right? So what are we doing when we're trying to use reports? Now, reports, when technology first came into the world of chiropractic, were great because there wasn't anything else. There was just reports, right? Which is better than paper, right, floating around your office. But what are you really doing? It's not proactive. What happens really is you've had this, you're driving, you're at the gym, you're at shopping, you're traveling around the world, or you're in Italy, whatever, and you remember a person you haven't seen in a while. And you're like, whatever happened to that patient? And you go to your team and you're like, oh, we lost them. We don't really know. They didn't show up this visit, or something happened. Process broke down. And what do you do about it? You train on that process. And you get better at that process. And, oh, we've got this nailed. And then, the next patient you remember. And the next patient. It's management by fire. It's management by fire.
Reaction.
It's totally reactive. As opposed to now, when we have the technology that's better with automation and AI, that AI can find the patient.
It forces you to be proactive.
Boom, let the work come to you.
Right.
And by the end of the day, like we were talking about with the billing side, if it's not zero, we didn't do everything. And it actually helps you be a really good manager.
Well, yeah. By the time you remember that this patient hasn't been in a while, if you did go to your staff and be like, hey, what happened to them? Oh, they missed an appointment, didn't reschedule. And you say, all right, let's get in contact with them. They're fine. They're like, oh, I'll call you if I need you. I mean, they don't dislike the office,
right? But
they're just like, yeah, I got what I needed.
Yeah, and your next, most common trigger or response is, how many other times has that happened? Oh, that's a whole nother question. That we got to do like 3 days of printing reports and finding more patients that we've forgotten about completely. Yeah, so and there's this unspoken kind of friction between the owner and the team. They want to just do their job and go home and feel good about what they did.
Like, take care of the people that are like in front of them.
They just want to do their job and get paid, reasonable. They don't want the doctor coming in steaming. Yeah. They're scared, right? There is actually this dynamic between everybody's happy and on the same team until the doctor's pissed off because something didn't happen properly. They don't want to feel like that. They want to feel good. So what automation actually also does is actually foster better teamwork and longer lifespan of your own staff. Because then now they know exactly, the system tells them exactly what to do every single day. They can finish it and they can go home, and you can't complain that they didn't finish it because they did, right? So the other thing it does is what happens when somebody doesn't finish their work for the day. Like, your front desk person, Mary, I always use Mary, right? Mary's got 10 tasks at the end of the day, and you go up there and you're like, Mary, how can I the conversation's so much lighter and easier. Mary, I see you have 10 no-shows. How can I help? What's the issue? Well, what if Mary said to you, well, I just started today. I don't even know what to do with that thing. You got a training issue.
Right.
What if Mary said, well, I called 50 of them and I just got 10 left. All right, maybe you have a capacity problem. Maybe Mary says, I hate calling no-shows. Like, I freaking hate it. Yeah. I really wish I could do this or that. Maybe you just need to be in a different seat in your office, wearing a different hat in your office. Yeah. Maybe Mary's the wrong fit for your office, but you can do something about it proactively in the moment, and everybody knows who's responsible for what, and so on. The other thing I'm thinking as we're talking is that's we're talking about 50 no-shows. That's a problem by itself. Unless you're seeing 2,000 a week, 50 is a lot, right? Yeah, right. So for that day. So the
50 no-shows would be a lot.
Yeah. So another thing that with just cloud-based technologies that has really been a game changer is now most newer types of systems that are being built for, like for example, one of them is ReviewWave. Yep. Because both systems are in the cloud, it really changes what we can do working together with those types of integrations. Gotcha. Fortis and credit card processing and reminders or other third-party systems that rather than Genesis having to build everything, like the credit card processing and the reviews and all this marketing stuff, which takes our focus away from doing what we do best. Rather than us having to do that, we can find people that are also really good at doing one thing, and the integration is now seamless, as opposed to in the past where you had all these other clunky integrations where things weren't really automated and break all the time. And since if they break, you're not a programmer in your office, you can't even fix it, right? You can't. Cloud-based lets everybody, like us and the other companies, if something breaks down, we can work on it. It's way more secure and all those things.
And I think I'm right on this, that because you have all this data in the cloud, that now, when you're in an office, you're kind of on an island. You don't know, like, am I busy? Am I not busy? Am I doing well? Am I not doing well? Like, is my collection percentage normal? To where you can look at other practices that maybe are your size or in your region and be able to compare data. I mean, it's all anonymous, obviously, but it's aggregated to where you can say, how am I doing relative to the herd? Because the only time, like when I was starting in practice, the only time I ever got to measure myself against other people was when we would go to, seminars and, everyone lies.
Right.
And so then you feel bad about yourself because you're like, oh, I'm not doing well.
There is much more accountability built into the model. We don't, just for the record, don't share other practices' information with, between them. But we directly, but we certainly are able to tell doctors, and every practice is very different in their composition of even the payer mix and all that stuff. So it wouldn't be so useful to see what other people make on average in your area because every practice is different. But what we do and can do is drill down into more specifics. For example, I see for my cash visits, what's my average collections? Right. What for my Aetna payments? My Cigna, my United, whatever the case may be. What are my collections on those things? What's my what are the allowable rates that I'm getting? One of the things we track with automation and artificial intelligence is your allowable amount. So if you're out of network, you have an allowable that comes back from the payer, and if it dips at all, because this is a subtlety that they do, right? They just lower it $1, $2. Why all of a sudden is the allowable going down? How's it going down? Isn't everything else in the world going up? Right. Except you get paid less. So why is that? But we're able to actually track that and automate the response to that. Gotcha. So as soon as they allow less than they used to, because it looks paid, right? They allowed 40 yesterday, now they allow 39, and they pay it. The patient owes a little more. But why do they suddenly do that? We automate, we find it, automate it, fire off the claim right to the biller, follow up. Why did you allow us less today? All of a sudden, what changed? But things like running reports like that, specific to payers, and we can drill down really deep into those types of things. And also goal setting, because you want to improve something. Typically, we have what's called a radar chart on your homepage, where you can set some goals. So now we know that, let's say, usually what we want to do with clients is just have them start using the system
Yeah.
and using some of the tasks and automation, but then start to measure certain things like no-show rates and all those things, and then say, okay, we want you to make more money. When you make more money, we want you to retain more patients. When you retain patients, we make more money. We're on the same team, right? So how can you, if no-shows was the issue, what do we do about it? Maybe we just make sure maybe you're not following up on those tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure we follow up on all those tasks by the time we meet again. Or maybe it makes sense to turn on another third party, like a appointment reminder system, and cut the no-shows in half just by reminding people about them.
Right.
And then it pays for itself, kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah. Tangent.
Yeah, right. So first I want to thank you for helping me pick out my pocket square and my lapel pin.
My pleasure.
My girlfriend was busy before this trip, so
it wasn't easy when you have 40 of each.
I had to bring them all just in case because I'm colorblind and I don't know. So I appreciate that. And then secondly, I appreciate you being on, man. It's been such a pleasure, like getting to hang out. I feel like we see each other like every other week now because we're at like 9 different.
I see you every
things
Monday.
Together. Right. Well,
at least
just like in person.
Yeah,
in person. You know, man, Genesis is doing so much for so many doctors, and it's just awesome. I love, you know, with marketing, like I am always trying to like learn from the best in the world and like trying to bring new information to the chiropractic profession. Yeah. And I feel like you're doing the same thing with technology and EHR and just trying to make chiropractors' lives easier, make them more money, and just kind of streamline the whole process.
Thank you, man. I'm likewise. I know that you are out there. This guy works really hard to you know, you're really passionate about what you do, and I love to be around people that are passionate about what they're doing. You clearly are. The fact that you're even doing this podcast, I've seen you evolve over the short time I've known you. Yeah. It's really cool to see. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Yeah. All right. We'll see you on the next one, guys.
Just because this episode is over doesn't mean you can't continue your path to $1 million practice. We've created chiropractic's most full-service marketing agency at LVRG Media to help you reach $1 million a year fast and continue to grow. You can get a free strategy session with me absolutely free right now. To get started, go to getmemorenewpatients.com. Once again, go to getmemorenewpatients.com, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Path to $1 Million podcast.